Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're on a pretty massive mission. We're trying to analyze a global snapshot from November 21st, 2025.
Yeah, we have a huge stack of material to get through. We're talking reports, briefing notes, analysis. It's it's a really dense picture of a world dealing with a lot at once.
Exactly. And we aren't here to just, read headlines at you. The goal is to cut through all that noise and give you the core insights.
The surprising details, the context that you might miss otherwise.
Right. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding the real stress fractures across the globe today.
And looking at all this material, the first thing that just jumps out is this incredible tension. It's escalation versus negotiation. You've got these escalating military operations in, well, multiple places, from Eastern Europe to the Middle East. And they're happening at the exact same time that major powers are trying to push these really controversial peace deals.
So they're completely interconnected.
Completely. It shows how tightly bound all these crises are. A failure in diplomacy, and boom, the conflict on the ground just accelerates instantly.
Okay, so let's unpack that Highwire Act. And I think we have to start with the biggest diplomatic story of the week, which is this attempt to, find an end to the war between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, and what's really foundational here is the sudden appearance of this major U.S.-led initiative. We're learning that President Trump has approved a pretty comprehensive 28-point peace plan.
28 points.
28 points. And what's different about this one is that it wasn't just created in a vacuum. The briefing notes we have confirm it was put together after detailed talks with both Russian and Ukrainian officials.
So this suggests there have been some serious back-channel conversations going on for a while.
Deeply rooted ones, yeah, despite all the public rhetoric.
But here's where it gets really complicated, right?
Yeah.
Because that 28-point plan, it is not some simple compromise.
Not at all.
The details are incredibly controversial, especially for Ukraine. Reports are saying the proposal includes actual territorial concessions to Russia.
Which would effectively solidify some of their current battlefield gains.
And it also puts strict limits on the future size of Ukraine's military.
And that's the strategic dilemma right there. I mean, these are extremely tough terms for Kyiv to even consider. But, and this is the key part, Ukrainian President Zelensky has signaled he's willing to actually work on a plan.
Wow.
Yeah. This was a central topic when U.S. Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll was in Kyiv. And the insight here is, I think, crucial for a U.S.-backed plan to have such painful terms and for Kyiv to still engage with it.
It suggests the situation on the ground is maybe worse than we're being told.
It could be that, or it could be that, future U.S. support is basically dependent on them showing some real movement toward de-escalation.
Okay, but Kyiv's willingness, that immediately creates friction with its allies.
Big friction. The European Union has voiced very public skepticism.
And their concern is what, exactly?
It's twofold, really. First, they doubt Russia's actually going to negotiate in good faith. And second, they are adamant that Europe has to be properly consulted on any deal that, fundamentally redraws the continent's security map.
They feel left out.
Completely marginalized in a deal that affects them more than anyone.
And you can see why they'd be skeptical when you look at what's happening outside the negotiating room.
Oh, absolutely. This is diplomacy running straight into the brick wall of military reality. Russia has massively accelerated its offensive operations just in the last few days.
And the analysis from the front.
It's not good. It indicates that Ukrainian defense lines are weakening on several key fronts. And that, of course, increases the risk of a major operational breakthrough by Russian forces.
So the U.S. plan feels urgent because it's trying to get ahead of a potential military collapse.
Exactly. It's not a negotiation from a position of, mutual strength. It's an attempt to prevent something much worse.
And the human tragedy behind all of this is it's devastating. The city of Ternopil reports confirmed 26 people, 3 of them children, were killed in recent Russian strikes.
And that horrific number is the real backdrop for these talks. It leads directly into this broader anxiety in Europe. A French general, Fabien Mandon, he just gave this incredibly blunt warning.
What did he say?
He stated pretty unequivocally that Russia is preparing for a wider military confrontation with Europe itself. And he put a timeline on it.
Within the next 5 years.
Within the next 5 years. So you have this split screen. On one side, a shaky peace plan. On the other, the stark reality of preparing for a continental war.
Let's shift our focus now, because that pressure in Eastern Europe is mirrored elsewhere. The Middle East, in particular, remains at a critical boiling point.
Yeah, the situation in Gaza is just continuing to intensify. Recent Israeli military operations, they've resulted in at least 32 Palestinian deaths.
And it's important to give some context here. There is technically a ceasefire in place.
There is. But for you, the listener, to understand the scale here, reports show that more than 300 people have been killed by Israel in Gaza since that ceasefire with Hamas officially began on October 10th.
So it's a ceasefire in name only, really.
The data shows that large-scale lethal military operations they've persisted. The casualty count remains tragically high.
And this is obviously fueling tensions across the region, especially with Lebanon.
Definitely. Israel has stepped up its strikes there, targeting what it says are Hezbollah weapons storage sites and infrastructure in villages in southern Lebanon.
And that expansion drew immediate international criticism. I saw France express deep concern.
They did. Everyone is worried about this igniting a full-blown conflict along that northern border.
Stepping back for a moment, it feels like these state security challenges are just everywhere, all at once. Let's pivot to Africa and South Asia, where internal crises are really consuming governments.
Yeah. Look at Nigeria. It's grappling with what you could call a severe dual crisis. On the one hand, a major judicial moment.
Right, the conviction of Nnamdi Kanu.
Exactly. The separatist leader was convicted on all 7 terrorism-related charges. This was after a trial that went on for a decade. So for the Nigerian state, it's a huge moment for their authority.
But at the very same time, that legal victory is just completely overshadowed by a devastating security crisis.
It is. President Tinubu actually had to postpone his trip to the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg.
That's a huge deal. That's the meeting of the world's 20 largest economy.
Major diplomatic event. And he skipped it. He skipped it to focus on rescuing 24 schoolgirls who were abducted in northwestern Nigeria. That decision tells you everything about their national priorities right now.
Security, humanitarian needs, they come before everything else.
And the only tiny piece of good news is a report that at least one of those girls managed to escape.
And just next door, there's more friction along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border.
Right. Pakistani military forces have intensified their raids near the border. They've killed 23 militants in operations targeting hideouts of the Pakistani Taliban.
And we should clarify, that's a group distinct from the Afghan Taliban who are in power in Kabul.
A key distinction, yeah. It really highlights this ongoing struggle for Pakistan to secure its own territory from these cross-border incursions.
Okay, let's step away from the conflict zones for a moment and look at the Asia-Pacific region, because the headlines there are just incredibly varied. Everything from natural disasters to major crime convictions.
Indonesia's getting hit with a real double whammy disaster scenario right now.
What's happening?
First, the volcano, Mount Semeru, was just raised to its highest alert level after it started erupting again. They had to scramble to rescue over 170 climbers.
And at the same time,
totally separate, widespread landslides have claimed 23 lives, and there are still 28 people missing. The strain on their national rescue services must be just immense.
And then moving over to the Philippines, we have this high-profile court case that really pulled back the curtain on transnational crime.
Yeah, a former town mayor, Alice Guo, who reports identified as a Chinese national, was convicted of human trafficking.
And this was tied to those illegal online gaming operations, right? The scam centers.
Exactly. The whole operation relied on forced foreign labor. It's this, ugly convergence of high-tech scams and just fundamental human rights abuses.
And just to round out this section, before we get to economics, we have to note 2 really grim transport tragedies.
Big goo. 13 people were killed when a passenger bus crashed off a bridge in Cambodia, and then dozens more were injured in a train collision in the Czech Republic. Just stark reminders of the everyday dangers that are always there.
Okay, let's switch gears completely. Let's dig into some of the global economic and tech shifts, starting with the U.S. economy, where it looks like politics is getting in the way of the data.
Yeah, it's an interesting picture. The U.S. economy added 119,000 jobs in September, which was actually better than expected.
But unemployment went up.
It did, crept up slightly to 4.4%. But here's the crucial detail. This data, which should be a clear economic signal, was significantly delayed because of an earlier federal government shutdown.
Yeah.
And that's the connection. It shows how all this domestic political instability we're seeing,
right.
President Trump threatening sedition charges, judges pushing back on troop deployments, it's not just a local D.C. story.
It has a ripple effect.
It directly impacts the transparency and, frankly, the reliability of global economic markers that everyone relies on.
But I think the biggest headline today in the tech world has to be this staggering legal penalty against Meta.
Well, this is massive. A court in Madrid has ordered Meta to pay Spanish legacy media outlets nearly €500 million.
$500 million in damages for copyright violations.
And this is so much more than just a fine. This is a landmark strategic move. The court basically said that Meta's whole model, monetizing news summaries, snippets, headlines, without properly paying the people who actually create the news,
It's illegal.
is illegal and constitutes massive damages. This is a powerful government regulator siding with traditional media. The precedent this could set for other EU countries, maybe even globally, is just enormous.
It could be a major turning point in who controls the information ecosystem and, who pays for it.
Absolutely.
It really underscores that a legal challenge can be just as powerful as military friction. Okay, let's try to wrap all this up with the broader political and environmental context that's coloring everything we've talked about.
And we've already touched on the very polarized climate in the U.S. We have a few more developments on that. A U.S. judge ordered an end to President Trump's controversial deployment of troops in Washington, D.C.
This was after a legal challenge.
Yes. And on the other side, the president has just escalated the rhetoric, threatening Democratic lawmakers with sedition charges for telling the military to reject any illegal orders.
I mean, that level of institutional tension, that kind of political aggression, it has to undercut the perception of U.S. stability on the world stage.
Of course it does, especially when you're trying to be the global broker pushing a 28-point peace plan abroad. It creates so much noise.
Now, on the global supply chain front, there is a small piece of good news, something that eases a major point of friction.
Yes. The Netherlands has decided to suspend its takeover of the chipmaker Nexperia.
And why is that significant?
Because Nexperia, while it's a Dutch company, is owned by a Chinese company. And the proposed takeover had become a real flashpoint in this, global tension over who controls semiconductor technology.
The chip wars.
The chip wars, exactly. So by suspending the takeover, the Netherlands is, at least for now, easing that friction with China over a critical part of the supply chain. And that's something that markets worldwide have been really anxious about.
And then on the environmental front, we have this strange, almost symbolic incident at the COP30 climate conference in Brazil.
Yeah, this is a weird one. Attendees were actually forced to evacuate after one of the pavilions caught on fire.
At a climate conference?
Right. I mean, COP stands for Conference of the Parties. These are the huge UN climate summits. And the whole thing gets disrupted by a fire.
Was anyone hurt?
The blaze was contained pretty quickly. But 13 people were treated for smoke inhalation. It's just a surreal moment. The world's leaders are there to discuss climate catastrophe, and they get chased out by a fire.
Unbelievable. And finally, just to round out the diplomatic movements.
Indian Prime Minister Modi is confirmed to be attending that G20 summit in Johannesburg, so India is maintaining its global engagement even with Nigeria's absence. And India is also expanding visa on arrival for UAE nationals, which is a clear move to strengthen those regional economic ties.
So let's put all the pieces together. If we synthesize this global snapshot from November 21st, 2025, what's the dominant theme here?
I think it's the overwhelming, just simultaneous nature of governing right now. You have this moment of extreme high-stakes diplomacy, that 28-point U.S. peace plan, and it's running headlong into the fierce reality of accelerating conflict in both Ukraine and Gaza.
At the exact same time.
At the exact same time. And you have the sheer volume of other crises, natural disasters in Indonesia demanding resources, paralyzing political standoffs in Washington, these huge legal battles that are going to define the future of information.
It highlights the challenge for leaders. Resources are strained, crises are all interconnected, and distraction is just constant.
It's an existential challenge.
So as we close out this deep dive, we want to leave you with a provocative thought, something that builds on everything we've just covered. We've seen today that global attention is just consumed by military conflict, political instability, humanitarian crises like the abductions in Nigeria.
Right. The world is focused on the battlefields.
Exactly. So in that environment, how much does a massive €500 million copyright fine against a tech giant like Meta, how much does that truly shift global behavior? Does this Madrid court ruling signal a real, lasting turning point in how global powers regulate these huge information platforms?
Or is it just a significant financial cost that a company like that absorbs while the world is, frankly, too busy looking elsewhere?
That's something for you to consider as you process this snapshot of the world.
A fascinating test case for digital governance in an age of geopolitical turmoil. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll catch you next time.